In April 1961, 1,400 trained Cuban exiles hit the beach at the Bay of Pigs. The CIA had been planning the operation for 18 months. It had a president's blessing, air support, weapons, and a detailed battle plan. Within 72 hours, it was over. Every man was either dead or in a Cuban prison. The operation cost $13 million. The real price came later, because it convinced Nikita Khrushchev that Kennedy was weak, and that calculation led directly to the Cuban Missile Crisis. You're watching BBTV Intelligence Briefing. Today's question: how does the most well-funded intelligence agency in history keep spending billions on operations that don't just fail, but make things dramatically worse? So here's the state of the intelligence budget right now. The National Intelligence Program runs to roughly $80 billion a year. The CIA's slice is estimated at around $15 billion. That number does not include covert action budgets, which are appropriated separately and classified at an even higher level. $15 billion is more than the entire defense budget of most nations on Earth. It buys analysts, satellites, stations in nearly every country on the planet, liaison relationships with foreign services, and a covert action capability. Some of it brilliant, much of it catastrophic, all of it paid for by the American taxpayer with no line-item accounting. The problem isn't capability. The CIA has some of the most sophisticated intelligence machinery ever built. The problem is what happens when that machinery operates without adequate oversight, when the feedback loop between action and consequence gets broken. When that happens, the CIA doesn't just fail, it fails expensively. And sometimes it creates problems that cost 100 times more to fix than the original operation cost to run. This is not a story about intelligence. It's a story about consequences. This is not a story about one operation. It's the whole ledger. The Bay of Pigs is the most famous failure, but it isn't the most expensive. Go back to 1953. Operation AJAX, the CIA-engineered coup that overthrew Iran's elected prime minister. Budget: roughly $1 million. The immediate return: the Shah of Iran, and 26 years of a pro-American government. The delayed return: the 1979 Islamic Revolution, which installed a government that has spent 4 decades funding terrorism, building toward nuclear weapons, and tying down American military resources. $1 million in, decades of strategic damage out. In 1979, the CIA launched Operation Cyclone, the largest covert operation in its history. Over the following decade, $3 billion in weapons and training to Afghan fighters. It worked. The Soviets bled, then withdrew, and the CIA walked away from Afghanistan the day the Soviets left. The weapons stayed, the training stayed, the fighters stayed, and some of them became the Taliban. Some of them became Al-Qaeda. The September 11th attacks that followed killed nearly 3,000 Americans and triggered wars that, by conservative estimates, cost the United States over $2 trillion. The return on investment on $3 billion of covert action is one of the most expensive equations in history. Here's what most coverage misses about CIA failures. It's not that the operations didn't work. Some of them worked perfectly. It's what happened after they worked. The intelligence community calls it blowback, the unintended consequences of covert operations that rebound against the country that launched them. The term was coined by CIA analysts in a 1954 review of AJAX. They predicted, with reasonable accuracy, that overthrowing Mossadegh would generate lasting resentment that could one day threaten American interests. The report was filed. The operation proceeded anyway. The resentment arrived on schedule, 26 years later. Blowback is a structural problem, not an operational one. An analyst can track where the weapons go. Predicting where the ideology goes is harder. In 2002, the CIA produced a national intelligence estimate concluding with high confidence that Iraq possessed weapons of mass destruction. The estimate was wrong. The war it helped justify cost the United States over $2 trillion and 4,500 American lives, and significantly strengthened Iran's position across the entire region. The CIA's analytical failure didn't fire a single shot, but it provided the intellectual foundation for one of the most expensive military decisions in American history. And here is the through line. In both cases, Mossadegh in 1953, Iraq in 2002. Intelligence was produced to support a decision that had already been made, and the cost of that inversion was measured in trillions. And this is where it stops being about intelligence at all. It becomes a question about what happens when secrecy permanently removes accountability. Technology. The CIA has invested billions in surveillance capability that has routinely been turned on American citizens. The Church Committee found the CIA had compiled files on over 300,000 Americans. Under Operation Chaos, a domestic spying program run with no legal authorization and no external oversight. Nobody in the chain of command asked whether it was legal, because the chain of command didn't require an answer. Economics, MKUltra, the CIA's mind control research program, ran from 1953 to 1973. It spent an estimated $10 million dosing unwitting American and Canadian citizens with LSD and running sensory deprivation experiments. When it was discovered, the CIA destroyed most of the records. The financial settlements to victims continued for decades. The reputational cost was incalculable. People, the most expensive single intelligence failure in CIA history, may not have been an operation at all. It was a man, Aldrich Ames. A CIA officer for 31 years, Ames sold the identities of virtually every Soviet asset the agency had recruited to Moscow. At least 10 people were executed as a direct result. The intelligence networks the CIA spent decades and hundreds of millions building were destroyed in a single year. Ames was not caught by sophisticated counterintelligence. He was arrested in 1994 because a colleague noticed he was living far beyond his government salary. And one layer deeper, it stops being about any single failure. It becomes a bet about whether an institution that answers to almost no one ever actually learns. The CIA has reformed repeatedly. After the Bay of Pigs, after the Church Committee, after the WMD failure, after every major catastrophe, reviews, reports, structural changes. And then the next failure arrives. The 9/11 Commission found the CIA had intelligence in the summer of 2001 that Al-Qaeda was planning a major attack inside the United States. The information was not effectively shared with the FBI. The reform that followed, creating the Director of National Intelligence, cost over $1 billion to implement and added a bureaucratic layer that senior analysts argue made coordination slower, not faster. Watch 3 indicators: whether Inspector General reports are declassified on any meaningful timeline, whether covert action findings ever face scrutiny beyond 8 members of Congress, and whether the next major intelligence failure arrives before or after America is already committed to a conflict. Because the pattern since 1947 is consistent. The agency built to prevent strategic surprises keeps generating them. And the cost of each surprise falls not on Langley, but on the taxpayer, the soldier, and the country that trusted the intelligence. The CIA doesn't fail because it's incompetent. It fails because it operates in a system designed to make certain kinds of failure almost inevitable. And that system has never been fundamentally changed. This has been BTV Intelligence Briefing. Stay sharp.